Welcome to English Through History. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe or leave us a review. It helps us to create more content and is appreciated by our small team here. We hope you enjoy today's episode. The Korean War is often called the Forgotten War. Nestled between the horrors of World War II and the Vietnam War, these more infamous conflicts often dominate modern history. Yet, the Korean War arguably has the most real-world impact on geopolitics. Incredibly brutal, it divided the Korean Peninsula into one of the most dangerous borders on Earth. One of the first conflicts involving the Cold War ideology, this war sucked in many countries, including China, the USA, and the Soviet Union. In today's episode, part one of a two-part series, we will be examining how this conflict came to be and the incredible destruction the North Korean army and its allies wrought as they pushed into the southern part of the country, leaving the peninsula teetering on disaster with the southern forces caught between northern forces and the sea. The Korean War was the result of a complex set of causes rooted in both historical and geopolitical factors. The primary causes can be traced to the division of Korea after World War II, ideological conflicts of the Cold War, and the ambitions of both North and South Korea to unify the peninsula under their respective governments. We've spoken in previous videos about North and South Korea in detail, but let's recap the events leading to this war. Korea was a Japanese colony from 1910 until Japan's defeat in World War II in 1945. After the war, Korea was liberated, but quickly became a point of contention between the emerging superpowers. To manage the surrender of Japanese forces in Korea, the Allies divided the peninsula on the 38th parallel, with the Soviet Union occupying the north and the United States occupying the south. This was intended to be a temporary division, but soon solidified into two separate states. In 1948, separate governments were established. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is North Korea, under Kim Il-sung, backed by the Soviet Union, and the Republic of Korea, which is South Korea, under Syngman-rhee, backed by the United States. Both governments claimed to be the legitimate authority over all of the Korean peninsula. The peninsula itself became somewhat of a proxy battleground for Cold War actors, with North Korea representing the communist bloc supported by the Soviet Union and then later China, and South Korea representing the capitalist bloc supported by the United States and other Western powers. The United States adopted a policy of containment to prevent the spread of communism, leading to increased support for anti-communist regimes, including South Korea. Conversely, the Soviet Union and China sought to expand communist influence, seeing North Korea as a strategic ally in East Asia. The outbreak of the war came as a result of these pressures. Kim Il-sung, the leader of North Korea, sought to unify the Korean peninsula under communist rule. With support from the Soviet Union and later China, he planned and initiated an invasion of South Korea. Syngman-rhee, the leader of South Korea, also sought unification, but under a non-communist government. South Korea wasn't the democracy it is today. Rhee's regime was authoritarian and repressive, which led to internal instability, but it was firmly backed by the US as a bulwark against communism. Before the full-scale war, there were numerous border skirmishes along the 38th parallel between North and South Korean forces. These skirmishes heightened tensions and contributed to the eventual outbreak of war. With the backing of the Soviet Union, which provided military aid and advisors, and later China, which gave tacit approval, North Korea finally felt emboldened to launch a military campaign to conquer the South. The war officially began on June 25, 1950, when North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel and launched a surprise invasion of South Korea. Despite the signs, the rapid advance of North Korean troops caught the South Korean and US forces off guard, leading to an urgent request for help for the United Nations. The United Nations Security Council, with the absence of the Soviet Union due to a boycott, passed a resolution calling for member states to assist South Korea. This led to the formation of a UN coalition led by the United States to repel the North Korean invasion. Kim Il-sung aimed to quickly overrun South Korea and unify the peninsula under communist rule before any significant international intervention could take place. The North Korean People's Army, NKPA, was better equipped and more experienced than South Korean forces, and the plan was to strike decisively, taking advantage of the element of surprise and the relatively weak defences in the south. Early in the morning of June 25, 1950, North Korean forces launched a coordinated attack across the 38th parallel. The assault involved approximately 100,000 North Korean troops, supported by tanks, artillery, and air forces. The invasion began with heavy artillery barrages followed by ground attacks aimed at key cities and transportation routes, including Seoul, the South Korean capital. The North Korean troops, using Soviet-supplied T-34 tanks and well-coordinated infantry tactics, quickly overwhelmed the South Korean forces, who were under-equipped and poorly trained for such a large-scale attack. Within only 3 days, North Korean forces had captured Seoul, forcing South Korean and US forces into a chaotic retreat to the south. So rapid was the advance of North Korean forces that it caught both South Korea and the United States by surprise. South Korean President Syngman Rhee and his government had to flee Seoul as the city fell. US and South Korean forces were pushed back to a small defensive perimeter around the port city of Busan, in the southeast corner of the peninsula. This area became known as the Busan Perimeter, where the UN forces made a desperate last stand. And this is where we will conclude our episode today, with most of the country under northern occupation and the Allied armies of the US and South Korean troops trapped in the city of Busan, desperately fighting for survival against overwhelming forces. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode and stay tuned for our concluding episode next week.